Hi, friends. Hello. Happy Friday. Holy smokes, it's Friday. It's been a long week, friends. Long week. Good week. Good week. It is pouring here in Maryland and a little bit weirdly warm and windy. So I'm really excited to be here today. I see people popping in. Hi, Rebecca, Gloria, Linda, Sue, Laura, Jesse. It's so great to see everybody here today. Got a really fun tutorial and a little bit of a chat about gratitude. Um, if you're new to the channel, my name is Lisa Hetrick. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live, and we're going to have some fun today. So today I'm sharing a stamp set mashup with two of my stamp sets that are retiring in the Gina K Designs in my Gina K Designs collection. I have several stamp sets that are retiring, and I'll share what they are. All of the links are in the description for what I'm using in today's tutorial. I see some more people popping in. It's so good to see everybody in here. I know that the Midwest is kind of getting pounded with some snow. Just some weird weather across the US today. But I'm happy to be here with you today to share this tutorial. And like I shared, there's some stamp sets that are retiring. I'm using two of them in today's tutorial. And I'm feeling very grateful and grounded today and just kind of excited to share. I'm also going to take a little bit of a dive into hot press watercolor paper. And here's why. A friend posted a viewer posted some questions on one of my hot press tutorials maybe a month or so ago. She just posted this week. Her name is Anne, and she had some really great questions about hot press paper, and I was going to be using hot press paper today anyway. So I wanted to share that, share some tips and tricks with the hot press paper. And yeah, we're going to do some watercoloring. Okay. All right, friends. Hello, hello. So good to see everybody here. Let's just get going. Okay. All of the links for the products that I'm using today are down below in the description. And I can see my chat is over here. So if you see my gaze heading to the left, that is where the chat is. Don't hesitate to ask questions along the way, and I'll try to pop them up and answer them. And I have a few things to share at the end. So let's go ahead and head to the down camera and do a quick walkthrough of the supplies. Okay, here's the card that I'm going to make today. Now, I have used these lemons in a couple I take my glasses off here, a couple mashups recently. So I wanted to kind of use them again today. So here are the two stamp sets that I'm using today. This is Life with Zest and Free to Flourish. These two stamp sets are retiring in my Gina K Designs collection. And I'm going to just kind of flip over real quick to a quick graphic just to kind of show you the stamp sets that are retiring in my collection with Gina K Designs. So, oops, let's not mess that up. So here are the different stamp sets that are retiring. I'm going to be using Life with Zest today and Free to Flourish. So I'll show this again at the end and share that with everybody. So let's just kind of pop back to our screen here. These are the stamp sets I'm using, and I wanted to share a little bit of some thoughts on retiring stamps. I had over 30 stamp sets in my collection with Gina K Designs, and it's really good because we have new stamp sets coming out all the time. It's really good to take a look back at some older stamp sets and see if it's time to say goodbye. And for these stamp sets, it is time to say goodbye. And for me, I have an immense amount of gratitude. I'm going to come back to the front camera real quick. Yeah, I have an immense amount of gratitude for this work that I get to do. The ability to be in service to our crafting community in this way, to illustrate these beautiful stamps that you in turn take and make beautiful projects with that bring you joy. So for me, when stamp sets retire, it doesn't feel like a super sad or bittersweet moment. It feels like, wow, I got, I have the privilege and I got the opportunity to create those stamp sets for you to create projects that bring you joy. So I just love that I have the opportunity to do this work and that I get to do this and share this with you. So it feels like a day of gratitude for me to be able to share these retiring stamp sets and share some inspiration. Now, these stamp sets will forever be in your collection, and note that I do have quite a few tutorials on my YouTube channel here with these stamp sets. So the inspiration is aplenty. Okay, so those are the stamp sets that we're using today. And, you know, they're in the clearance section on the GinaKDesigns.com website. And they are really marked down, just a phenomenal steal. So go grab them while supplies last. And once they're gone, they're gone. So it's all good. Okay, so I'm using craft cardstock today. I'm using an A2 sized craft cardstock. Thank you, Laura, for those sweet words. She said God gave you the gift to share. I believe so too. I've got the Master Layouts die that I've cut a piece of hot press watercolor paper out of. I am using, that's going to be my card base. I am using Strathmore Ready Cut hot press watercolor paper today. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about using hot press paper. I've shared many techniques using this paper. If you've been following me for a while, you know that Strathmore is this ready cut watercolor, but the hot press and the cold press, because they're 100% cotton. I really enjoy using these for my paper crafting projects. And so I've got all those stamps here. I've got their coordinating dies. And now the inks that I'm going to be using today, we're going to do a mix of watercoloring with our inks and then watercoloring with my, I've got my little Cotman set here. And this is just, the last couple tutorials, I've been talking about using some watercolor palettes that are a little more budget friendly. And this is just last week I used a watercolor Cotman set. This week I'm using one. I'm going to use burnt sienna and going to be using a little bit of these two yellows in our tutorial today. I've got wild dandelion, friends. I have grass green, medium spruce. This color is awesome. It's got that eucalyptus kind of green to it, which I love. I've got obsidian for my sentiment, and I've got craft Gina K ink as well. Okay, now what we're going to do is, before we get started on some of the assembly of the card and some of the watercolor, I am going to do a little technique, another lifting technique with paper towel this time. Last week we did a lifting technique with our brush. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. So I want to talk a little bit about hot press watercolor paper, because this question came up from a viewer this week. She was struggling, her name's Ann, she was struggling with using the hot press watercolor paper. And this is one of the reasons why. When we're using cold press watercolor paper, 100% cotton, it's a very thirsty paper. So it also has some texture, and it's got those 100% cotton fiber, so it takes in a lot of water. Now, hot press paper is a little smoother. It's 100% cotton. It's beautiful. It's wonderful to work with, but it's a smoother paper. So their fibers are a lot more dense, and the watercolor will, working in like super wet washes on hot press paper, can sometimes feel like counterproductive. It can feel very challenging. So what I want to talk a little bit about is when you're working with your hot press paper, when you're doing watercolor at all, I always talk about how paper matters, because it does kind of, if you can use less expensive paints, but try to spend a little bit more on your paper and you'll get the results that you're looking for. Now, when I'm working with cold press papers, I tend to work with brushes. This is a Princeton Heritage round brush. This brush is a little less thirsty. So it holds water very, very well, but it is less thirsty, meaning that I have to pick up my water more frequently. And that is one of the benefits of working with this kind of brush on the hot press paper. Hot press paper is really, really good for light washes of water. Now, I have done massively large washes of water and done really drippy, drippy wet washes. And you can absolutely do that with hot press paper, but you have to know that it's going to give you more blooms in your watercolor work, meaning you're not going to get as smooth of a wash of color. So this is a little bit of water. I would say not super soupy wet, but just wet, and I did a wet onto wet technique. Now, one of the things I love about hot press paper is doing wet onto dry. So my paper is dry, my brush is wet. You can see I'm picking up some of this burnt sienna, and there's a lot of pigment in there. And then I'm painting it on to my surface. Now you can see my brush is already starting losing its water. It's already starting to get dry. You can see the streaks. So to control your paint a little bit more on hot press paper, you might want to consider using a less thirsty brush. I use a less expensive brush like a Taklon, or these Princeton Heritage brushes. You often see me use the silver black velvet brush. Those brushes are super thirsty. They carry they can hold a lot of water. So when I'm working on hot press paper, I tend to use less a brush that'll hold less water, and I tend to use less water so I can get a smoother wash. So let me just show you real quick like what happens if I've got a lot of water on my paper and I'm doing like super, super wet washes. It can be very, very beautiful, but when it dries, it's going to like be less of a clean. You can see those blooms. See those blooms happening there. So I think, because the water is pushing back the pigment. So when this dries, the water is pushing back the pigment, and you're going to have like a variation of color that's less smooth than you would if you just paint on your washes of color. You can see my brush. So this is some of the ways that you can have a little bit more success with hot press paper. And the other thing I like about hot press paper is that it's really good with your inks. It's really good with your color. We've done tutorials on this channel with color pencil, with ink tints, with watercolor pencils, with water-based markers. Perfect on this paper. Can get a lot more of a smoothie kind of wash. Smooth paper gives you smooth look and feel. Look at that. As that has dried, you can see how the water has pushed back the watercolor pigment, so you get blooms. When you use a lot of water, you can see around the edges. See how the edges are a little harder? It's because the water's pushing the pigment out to the edge. Instead of with cold press paper, it kind of sinks into the fibers a little bit more. Now I could blend this out. If that happens to you on hot press paper, you can go in and kind of blend it out a little bit, but you can see what starts to happen. I get more blooms. Now, I love the way I love bloomy, washy watercolor. I love the way it looks. But if you're working on hot press paper and this is not a look that you're going for, don't do the wet into wet technique, and that will help you. Okay. I hope that makes some good sense. As we start to build out our card, I'm going to show you a little bit more. We're going to do a little bit more. We're absolutely going to be painting on hot press paper. So let's give it a go. Okay, here's our card for today. Super fun. Now, when I created the stamp set, Free to Flourish, friends, this stamp set was created, I want to say 2018. I feel like it was 2018. 2018 or maybe early 2019, and I was really loving the look and feel of like a forest kind of design, a foresty look. We've got some blooms here, and this piece right here was kind of inspired by like a home decor banner. So that's what kind of inspired this whole set. We've got all of this. We've got this eucalyptus. We've got this movement going here. I love these sentiments. Show up and shine and free to flourish. They're just very inspirational, and happiness blooms from within. So just a little bit about the inspiration for that set. And then this set, Life with Zest, I believe this one came out in 2020 maybe, or 2019. Somewhere around that time frame. And I wanted to do something with lemons. I've talked about this set before. We've done a couple other stamp tutorials with it. So it's just kind of fun. And I love it. And I know that many of you have it. There's two-step stamping options with it. There's all these really fun blooms and this really, really fun picture. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump in. Now, I have pre-stamped some of our images. Let me open up the card and move it over here. I've pre-stamped out my images today because I'm going to watercolor them, and then I'm going to cut them out on the die cutter. And I've got a couple other images that I want to get stamped. So let's start with the eucalyptus. I have the 2 pieces of eucalyptus from Free to Flourish. I'm going to stamp them out in, here we go, medium spruce. And I'm going to, now because I'm stamping on watercolor paper, I'm not going to get the most crisp impression. If I use the Misty and I kind of went in like 2 or 3 times, I could get a more crisp impression, but that's okay. I'm not going for that, friends. This is what I'm going for. You can see that the impression is not super crisp, but I'm going to take my brush with a little bit of water, and I've been showing this technique for the last couple tutorials. I'm just going to pick up that color, that medium spruce. I love bringing this up to the camera. I'm going to pick up that color and just kind of activate it. Activate that water-based ink and move it around and just let it dry. I'm going to move it around a little bit and let it dry. Sue just popped in and shared that she made 4 cards for her coworkers last week using last week's tutorial. That's exciting. Thank you, Sue, for sharing. I'm sure that they love them. Okay, so I've just kind of blended that color out a little bit, and you're going to see you get a little bit of a wash of that eucalyptus color, that medium spruce, which is very eucalyptus-like color. So I've just kind of blended that out a little bit. I'm also going to come in, because right now these pieces are going to be embellishments. I'm going to take this leafery and I'm going to stamp this down in some grass green. Dun, 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 just ink that up, and I'm going to be cutting that out. This is going to be another embellishment. Just kind of stamping that down. And I'm going to go in a little bit and just move that color. Just kind of follow the lines. And all I'm doing here is just moving this color a little bit and adding just a little, just washing the leafery. Washy. Okay. All right then. Got my embellishments, those 3 embellishments done. Now I'm going to come over and we're going to do some watercoloring of these pieces right here. We're going to start with the frame piece. I'm using burnt sienna and maybe a little bit of burnt umber. Let's just get, when I'm working on a watercolor paper crafting project or a watercolor project, I like to try to get my paints out and ready for me to use. So I'm just going to set that up with a little bit of the burnt sienna and a little bit of this burnt umber up here. And I'm using Cotman watercolors, challenging myself to use my Cotman watercolors. And the reason why, another reason why I'm using Cotman is I really like these neutrals. These 2 colors in the Cotman line, they granulate really nicely. They give us a little extra pigment texture, which is super nice. Hey, Jessica, good to see you. Jessie just shared that she had the problem with the super, getting a super crisp impression on hot pressed paper. So what I explained with water, just add a little bit of water to it and blend it, just really helped her out. So that's great. All right, I'm going to move this Cotman set out of my frame here a little bit. Laura just said, I never think to use your glass mat like that. Yes! Sometimes I'll just have like, I have another one of these glass mats on my work table, and I'll just have like a whole bunch of stuff just set up on the glass mat or, you know, in the palette. But it's just kind of a fun way to just get your paints down. Okay, now my brush is wet. My paper is dry. I'm going to go in with a little bit. I'm picking up probably just a medium amount of color, and I'm just going to follow these lines that I have already illustrated into the 2 wood pieces of the stamp set. Clean my brush and then just kind of blend them out just a little bit with a wet brush. You can see that I'm barely touching the paper, just getting a little bit of color in there, just to kind of give that feeling of the wood grain. I'm going to turn this way. Let's just back some of these things out. I'm a lefty, so I'm always turning my paper around. Paper is dry, brush is wet. This brush is not a super thirsty brush. So you can see that I'm just dropping some color in, and it's pretty intense. Probably more like a mix between the whole milk and the 2%, somewhere in between. So I'm going to just kind of let that be. And I'm purposely not painting in. I'm leaving a little bit of the white from the paper. I'm going to go flip this back around and go back in with a little bit of this burnt umber, which is pretty intense. And I'm just dropping it in. My brush is wet, pigment's wet, paper's dry. And I'm just, I cleaned off my brush, and my brush is not super wet right now. It's just a little bit wet. And I just want to get those 2 colors to kind of mix and mingle a little bit right there, just to give a little bit of that red from the burnt sienna and a little bit of the darker brown from the burnt umber. Just kind of replicating that look and feel of wood. Okay, just added a little bit of that burnt umber in there. Now I'm going to bring this up and just kind of show you that the paper is, everything is pretty, you can see it's not sopping wet. Very unusual for me, right? Not super washy. I'm not worried about going outside the lines either, because I'm going to be cutting that with the die cutter, with the die cut. Now I'm going to come in to my middle here, And I'm going to apply a light, a light coating of water. And you can see my brush is not a super thirsty brush. So I'm having to dip my brush into the water more often. I'm going to come in with some of this burnt sienna, and I'm just going to drop this in. Now, the Cotman watercolor paint, the Winsor Newton in general doesn't like, a lot of their colors don't whoosh. And I've talked about that before, how some watercolor brands will whoosh and some won't. So it depends on the brands, and getting to know your watercolor paints really kind of helps you with your techniques. Now I'm just adding some of this color in and just kind of moving it around a little bit. It looks a little bit like a hot mess right now. That's okay, because I'm going to take a little bit of paper towel and sop up some of this extra. My brush is clean, and you can see I'm just touching the edges of things and just kind of blending them out. Now I want to add a little bit more, a bigger concentration of this color in the center. You can see I'm just dancing my brush around a little bit and just letting it, kind of forcing it into a couple of different spots. But what I want to show you is that color. See the pigments? That is called granulation. I know I've talked about this before, but the pigments are separating from their binder and they're reacting to the water and they're granulating, and it's gorgeous. I just love when that happens. I'm going to take a little bit of paper towel, and I'm going to, because this paper towel has some texture in it, I'm just going to get my stamping hat on and just kind of stamp in my paper towel. And this is another lifting technique. So you can see that how I've lifted that out. We've got that texture from the paper towel happening. I want it to be a little more extreme. Oh boy. Oh boy. I added quite a bit. Let's go for a little bit more of an extreme lift. Sue just shared, I love your descriptions of things. I think, Sue, that there's no scientific way or right or wrong way or real accurate professional description for the way I come up with things. I like the way things, it's just how I feel in the moment. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of my paper towel, and I'm going to just tap it in so I get a little bit more of that extreme lifting and that texture. Ooh, I'm digging it. Now we're going to be covering quite a bit of this, and this, remember, watercolor dries back. It looks super vibrant now, but I'm loving all of that granulation there. I'm going to leave that be just a smidge. Something is not, I'm going to just kind of move this a little bit. It feels a little harsh. Just going to blend out some of those little harsh lines from lifting and let that be. Now you can see that you can see what I talked about with hot press paper, how that water pushes the paint back. We've got that blooming happening. I don't dislike it. I like it. I dig it. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that darker brown. My brush is a little bit soppy. I don't want it to be that. And just kind of add just a few stroke lines in there with the tip of the brush. Come back out. That looks pretty good. But I don't want anything to be too super harsh, so my brush doesn't have a ton of water on it. And then these edges, I'm just taking a clean brush and just kind of blending them out. Sue just shared, I find myself saying that's okay when things look messy at first. Yes, because it does look like a little bit of a hot mess at first, but you got to let it ride. And especially with watercolor, you got to wait for it to dry. All right, I'm going to, let's just take, add a little water here, and I'm going to pick up that pigment, just get that off of my glass mat there. Sue just shared, I can see adding cording or lines on the top to make it look like a frame or a bulletin board. Yes! That's what we're going to do. I've got that little stamp in the set that's like this little like frame piece. We're going to add that to the top to kind of just make it, just to kind of finish that off at the end. All right, I'm going to come around here and we're going to do, I'm going to paint my lemons. I'm going to use 2 different yellows and a green. So I'm going to use lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. And I'm going to take this sap green and add a little bit of the Payne's gray to get that realistic leafery kind of look. And I'm going to show you that. So let's get some sap green down here. I do love sap green, actually in all brands. I just love it. It's a nice, good base green. It's got a little bit of yellow in it. I'm going to take a little bit of this Payne's gray and just kind of touch it over the edge here. And just add a little bit of that Payne's gray in there to kind of darken it up. Now, just going to show you, doing a little bit of color mixing, a little bit of added. So here's my sap green. See how pretty that color is? Love it. I take a little bit of Payne's gray. Ooh, that was a little more than a little bit. But just kind of add a little bit of Payne's gray to it. Like I did here. It kind of changes it. It makes it a little less lemony. It makes it a little less yellow greenish. And it gives it a little bit, skews it more on the olive side. And gives it a little bit more like our grass green color in the Gina K line. So that's how I was able to kind of match those 2 colors up. Okay. Little geekery. Little color mixing geekery there. I love me some geekery. All right, add in a little bit of that Payne's gray. Ooh, that's going to be a beautiful green. Okay, now I'm going to come in with my lemon yellow. Let's take my lemon yellow. The other thing I didn't do before we started is kind of activate my paints. And this is the great way to do it. Let me put that camera in the frame there. Just get my paints wet and juicy and ready. And I didn't. Lemon yellow. I love lemon yellow. It's such a beautiful color. The Winsor Newton version is a little more opaque. If you want it to be even more opaque, we talked about that last week, gouaches and adding whites to your paint to just get a little more opacity going. I'm going to add a little bit of the cadmium yellow right here and just kind of leave that there. All right, I'm coming back. Now look at what's going on here. Definitely got a rustic look to this. Honestly, friends, it looks like a hot mess, but it's not going to when we're finished. It won't. It'll be pretty. Okay, we're going to go in with the lemons, and I am going to paint wet onto dry. I'm going to start at the top of my lemon here, and then I'm just going to go full strength, adding pigment into about halfway down on the lemon. Clean off my brush, come in, and then with a wet brush, but the paper is dry, use the pigment that is already here and blend it out, transition it out all the way to the edge of the lemon. Now, this is one other way that you can be a little bit more successful with hot press paper, is really kind of controlling how much paint you put on your paper. It's got that washy watercolor look, but less water. There's a lot less water in my brush. Digging it. Okay. Now, at the top here, I'm going to add a little bit of the cadmium yellow and just kind of drop a little bit of it in around this one edge. And I'm going to just gently touch it, leave it, let it do its thing. I just said I was going to leave it, let it do its thing, but I didn't. Leave it, let it do its thing. Robbie just said, just got to trust the method. Yes, you're learning this. That's good. It gets you out of your comfort zone. Trust the process. Trust the process. Sue just shared, I know I've said this before, but I love watching you paint because you're left-handed. Makes me feel like I can do it. You can do it. We've talked about lefties before. We've talked about this on the channel. Yes, you can do it. Okay, going to my other lemon, you can see my ratio, my water to paint ratio. I'm coming in at about like a whole milk strength. It's pretty intense, right? It's a not a lot of paint, but it is an intense amount of paint. Cleaning off my brush, got that full strength value of that lemon yellow. Cleaning off my brush, and then I'm just going to lightly touch the edges and transition that color all the way out to my outer edge of the lemons. Then I'm going to come back in, drop a little bit more at that top. That transition seems a little bit like yellow and light yellow, so I've cleaned off my brush and I'm just going to draw that out a little bit more. Come in with my cadmium yellow and kind of hover around that edge, one of the edges. I'm also going to do a little bit of stamping inside of this lemon with some of the detail stamps that are in this set. And I'm just dropping this in, trusting it, letting it do its thing. I'm going to blend that transition out, leave it be, and let it do its thing. And I'm digging it. I'm probably not going to go back in with another layer. I'm going to leave it. Now, I'm going to do the same technique with my leafery here. I'm going to pick up my paint. My brush is wet. My paint is at like a whole milk strength. And turning this, I'm just very tip of the brush. I'm just going in right here and putting a little bit, just using the stem. That's a pretty intense color. Ooh, and I'm looking at it upside down, so it's getting a little wonky, but that's okay. Clean off my brush, kind of tap off any of that excess water. Just let the brush be a little bit wet, and then grabbing the color that's there and pulling it out to transition it out around the edges. Now, I've got a lot here in those stems, so I can use that color. I want to add a little bit more. I'm just dropping some in. I'm going to transition the color that's already there out. Okay. Transition that out to the edge. Same thing with this one. Oops, I had a little bit of pigment on there. Okay, and transition this out to the edge. And then if I don't feel like there's enough darks and lights, I'm just going to drop some color in and let it be. Let it be. Okay, we've got 2 questions. Sue just shared, I'd love to see you do a live where you actually draw a flower, fruit, or any image. Yes! I would love to do that. I would love to do that. I think that would be like a separate video because we wouldn't end up doing a card making. Or maybe we would. But yeah, thank you, Sue, for that idea. I would love to do that. Catherine just shared a question. Let's go ahead and pop up this question so everyone can see it. It looks like there's less bleed with the hot press paper. Is that why you should go all the way to the edge of the image with the transition? So there's less bleeding. Catherine, it's a great question. Fantastic question. There's less bleeding because I am controlling how much water is in my brush, how much water and pigment, and how much water is on the paper. So I am working wet to dry. So let's go ahead and do that. My brush is wet. I've got my pigment here. I'm lifting it up. I'm getting a good load of that pigment. And I'm just applying it at full strength, like 100% whole milk strength. I'm just applying it with the tip of my brush into the leafery right there. So 100% whole strength. So I am really taking control of what happens here. Cleaning off my brush, getting the pigment off. My brush is wet, not sopping wet. And then I'm going to just hit, oh, that's sopping wet. Let's make it not sopping wet and just use the paint that's there and just transition it out to the edge. So I get that variation of light to dark, but I'm not, let's get a little bit more pigment here. It's not super washy. Not super washy. It's just a controlled transition. Now, right there, you see I got that little drop of water and it created that bloom effect. I'm leaving it. I'm going to dig it. I'm going to leave it. We're going to let it be. If you don't like that bloom, you would just go back in and add a little bit more pigment. A little more watercolor pigment. Cheryl just shared, I would love to see that also. I'm going to have to do that, like a little paint with Lisa. That'd be like a little bit of a different thing where I would draw it and paint it. Maybe what we could do is I would draw it. I would also have that drawing for you. You can download it. You can paint along with me. That would be super fun. Okay, Catherine just asked a fantastic question. And this, Catherine, I'm going to pop that one back up. What makes a brush less thirsty? It's actually the different brands of brushes. This brush, this is a Princeton Heritage brush. It is, the differences are what the brushes are made out of. This brush is less thirsty. It tends to hold a little bit less water than, say, let's grab one of my thirstier brushes and some of these other new Princeton brushes. So this brush right here, the Silver Black Velvet, this is like a super, super thirsty brush. It holds a lot of water. The hair is like a squirrel. And some synthetics. Now there's a lot of brushes that are out that have synthetics that, like this Princeton Aqua Elite is supposed to hold just as much water as like the squirrel hair. So the difference is the brush. And then knowing these things and knowing the kind of paper you're working on can help control things. Now, if you're just working with a super thirsty brush all the time, you're just going to control, you can make it less thirsty. You can make it less by using less water. So it really does depend on your brush. And the way you're going to know if your brush is thirsty or not is, I'm going to show you. I'm going to pick up a little bit. I've got my Silver Black Velvet, which is my go-to washy brush. I'm going to pick up some sap green and I'm going to go look at this. I could just keep going before it starts to run out of water. See how far I got? Now I'm going to go in with this Princeton Heritage and get the same amount of water, just kind of sopping wet, make it as soppy wet as I can, and go. And you can see that I'm already starting to lose water right about here because this brush is less thirsty. That's not a bad thing. You can always go back in and just blend it out, add more water. But when I'm doing washy techniques, I tend to work with the Silver Black Velvets because they're thirsty. Another brand is the Princeton Neptune. Let me grab one of those so you can see it. Neppy, where are you? Here we are. The Princeton Neptune. Oh, no, that's a Heritage. I'm sorry. but they look exactly the same. The Princeton Neptune brush is a super, super thirsty one too. Now these new ones, the Aqua Elites, I'm nerding out a little bit, so we've digressed a little bit into brush chatter. These Princeton Aqua Elites are synthetic, and they're supposed to be super, super thirsty. And I've played with them, and they kind of are. They're really nice, so I went pretty far. They hold a lot of water, Brushes are personal preference. You could easily just go pick up some brushes from your local, big box store and your local craft store and just try them out or try the brushes that you have. Just know it's you're controlling the water. So if you have a craft brush at home, you can easily you just know that they're synthetic, so they're going to be less thirsty. You're just going to need to add more water to your brush to get the effects that you want. Okay, so I've got all my pieces here, and I'm going to go in. Let's see if I missed any questions. Kathy said she did the balloon class last night. It was fantastic. Thank you. Oh, Laura said you need to sign up for watercolor classes. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. It's so good. It's so very nice of you all to say beautiful things about the watercolor classes that I have in my Craft Your Joy classroom. All right, I'm going to die cut some of these pieces out. Friends, I've already die cut these 3 pieces. I did them off camera, and we've got them. It's all good. Just saving a little time. I'm going to die cut these 3 pieces out. Honestly, I'm not sure I'm digging the way this looks yet. So let's see. All right, I'm coming over to my die cutter here. I'm going to cut out all my pieces. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to pop them in the chat. And I'll pop in and answer them. Ooh. All right, I am using I use the Spellbinders Platinum 6. It's the one I like to use. You would use whatever die cutter you have, or you could fussy cut them. I'm loving the way these lemons look. We've got a little bit more detail that we're going to put on the lemon as well. When I come back into frame, I'm going to stamp some more details. I'm wondering if you can hear the whipping wind that's happening outside right now. It is intense, weirdly warm winter weather day, but rain. So Maryland's weird. Okay, running this through my die cutter, you can hear it clank clank. Oy. All right, bring this back over. Take a peek. Hopefully I did them and hopefully I cut them straight. I have a habit of not doing that. So let's pop all my pieces out. Put my die cut pieces back over. Okay, so I've got all my pieces, all my little embellies. Now I'm going to bring my lemons back over here because in the stamp set, in the Zest stamp set, I've got this little piece right here that mimics the little dimples in the lemons. So we're going to stamp some little dimples in. And I'm going to come in with, I think I'm going to do them in green. Could do them in black. Cheryl Sperry says we have a snowstorm today. Yes, there's a big snowstorm happening in the Midwest. It is just crazy windy, rainy, and the temperature is like, I can show it to you on my watch, 49 degrees. It was like 60 about an hour ago. So our temperature is dropping, and like this weekend it's supposed to be super cold again. But, it's winter. It's supposed to be cold. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp down those little dimples, and it just adds a little extra texture and a little extra texture and dimension to the little lemons. I love these little lemons. I just love them. So cute. Okay, now it's time to bring in, where did I put them? Here we go. It's time to bring in, Cheryl just said, oh, we're in Maine. Ah, my cousin lives in Maine. I do love Maine. It's very, very pretty. She is in the Portland area, so it's like southern Maine. Robbie just shared it's only 39 degrees in California. That's cold for California. Whoosh, that's cold. Okay, now I've got my card base, and I've got my card base is cut with the Master Layouts die. That's down in the description. Cut out with the hot press paper, and here's why. Going to use my, let's go ahead and grab these two leafery stamps, these two pretty leaferys, and create some leafery that's going to be behind the frame here. So I'm going to just kind of eyeball it. I'm going to start down here. So I'm going to go here, like, and here, and just kind of create this frame. I'm using grass green. And here's why I'm using the hot press paper. You could use your Gina K, you could use your whatever white paper you want. I'm going to eyeball this. Kind of want this to show a little bit. So I'm turning it this way, stamping it down. And I'm going to come in with my brush and just hit that watercolor. Hit that grass green with a little bit of water. And just kind of wash out that leafery. Just a smidge. Just to add to the overall look and feel of it having a watercolor effect to it. Okay, let's, so not good at cleaning the blocks. All right, and see what's going to happen is I just got a little bit of that leafery just kind of showing up on the outside there. Okay, I'm just checking the chat here. Oh, Sue just said, I'm expecting my lemons to come today. I love it. All right, I'm going to just go ahead, use this as my anchor point and stamp that piece of leafery kind of out there. So I've got this like little bit going. I got a little schmutz. Oops, got a little schmutz up there, but that's okay. And again, just getting my brush a little bit wet, and I'm just kind of going over the leafery pieces that are here and just give it a little washy watercolor. Okay, let's just take a peek at what we got here. Okay, I'm going to come this way and this way. So let's go ahead up here and just kind of stamp that down. Take that one off, put my big one on. Oh, that wind is whippy. And just kind of, yeah, just pop that down right there. Not really concerned about the look of it being symmetrical. Going over it with my wet brush. Moving that grass green color to just get that washy watercolor effect. Because you know, that's what we do here. On this Craft Your Joy channel, we do watercolor. And we love it. All right. It's very subtle. It's super, super subtle. Just kind of bleeds and blends it out a little bit. And I'm digging it, like it. All right, now I'm going to add this piece right here on. And knowing that I've got a little bit of the leafery showing behind it, I've got this piece that I want to put up on top. So from the, where is it? Here it is. From the Free to Flourish, we've got this little curly Q at the top that's kind of like a little picture hanger anchor kind of thing. Sort of. Picture anchor hanger thingy, right? Cheryl just said that this card would be super fun to mass produce. Yes, it would be. It would be super easy. You could do all your embellishment pieces. You could paint up all your pieces ahead of time and just inking this up with some craft ink. And I'm going to place this down. It's going to help me just kind of get my position. Just placing that down to just kind of get my position for where I'm going to put my frame. Okay, let's get a little bit of foam tape. Where are my scissors? Here they are. Get a little bit of foam tape. Take the lid off. And then I'm just going to cut this down the center. Whoopsie. Cut this down the center. I'm going to hit the back of this into, let's get that, make sure you can see what I'm doing. Hit the back of this, and then let me just tear off a little piece for the middle. Okay. And kind of clean that up. I know a lot of paper crafters use tweezers to get their backing paper off. I am tweezer challenged, so I don't use tweezers. All right, I'm going to turn this upside down so I can see this piece right here. So I can position this just so that the hanger looks like it's actually hanging, that it's kind of attached to this piece. And just kind of eyeball it. I'm digging that. I'm loving it. Okay, still feeling a little bit not sure about how dark that brown is, but I'm rolling with it. It's time to put some embellishments in, give it a little splatter, add our sentiment, and see how we feel about it after our sentiment. Got a little bit of Connect glue, just activating that, making sure that's good to go. Yeah, all right. Got my big honking lemon. Going to start with that first. And here's what I'm going to do. There's a little tiny lip right there. And I'm going to anchor that lemon where that piece of leafery from the lemon goes behind it. And then that's going to give me my positioning for dropping in all of my other pieces. Now I chose this super green, super natural looking color palette today because I'm feeling grounded and grateful, and I normally work in super bright colors, but as I shared at the beginning of today's live, just feeling super grateful for having the opportunity, the privilege to come to you. I'm just nesting this little tip behind the lemon here and just kind of having it go up in the air just a smidge. So it's kind of whoosh, kind of doing this little arc. I'm digging that, digging the way that looks. Have this privilege to come to you and first, be an illustrator on the Gina K Designs team. It brings me great joy to be in service in this way and do this work. I love it. I absolutely love it. And so when I was thinking about all of these things, and as sets were retiring this week and sharing with you what I wanted to share for our this week's mashup, I just felt like very earthy, very grounded, very grateful. And so that inspiration, I'm going to nest this piece of eucalyptus right up underneath here, so it kind of overlaps a little bit with my lemon, but just kind of sticks out there just a smidge. Hold that down for just a second. Feeling just super grateful that I get to share my gifts with you. I need a little more glue. And in turn, I hope it brings you lots of joy. Plus, we have so many fun things coming out with Gina K Designs. So all the illustrators on the team, we work like 6 to 8 months ahead. So I'm illustrating, like turning in illustrations and things for the latter part of the year. And I get to like rediscover things all over again when they release, and I get to do this work. It's just, I'm nesting these two pieces together. So I've got like this framing happening here. We've got a frame, and then we have some leafery popping out, so it gives it a little more texture. And then I've got this framing of these embellishments happening right here, and I'm just digging it. Digging it. Thank you, Sue. Oh, everybody's comments about that. They love my designs. I'm so happy you're teaching me how to do all the wonderful things with watercoloring. I'm just happy and grateful to be here. Everybody is so super sweet today with the comments. Thank you. Now, what I should have did is I should have done all of the I should have glued this to the cardstock base first, but I didn't because I got all hung up in talking about this immense, how privileged I am to be in service in this way and sharing the joy with you. I'm just going to put a little glue back there, attach it to my card base here, digging it, loving this. Okay, now I have my sentiment, show up and shine, and that's what we used here. Show up and shine. I cut it out. I already pre-stamped this and cut this out with one of these sentiment strips from Gina K. But before I put it on, I'm going to do a little bit of splatter because I don't want splatter to get on my sentiment. So let me move that out of the way. I'm going to pick up a little bit of sap green with my brush. Cheryl just said, I love that your designs are interchangeable. Yes. So when I am illustrating stamps for Gina K Designs, I'm always thinking about all of the images in my entire collection. How can they interchange? Are they proportionally designed to fit together? Could you take this set and mash it up with that set? So that's why on this channel, in these tutorials, I focus a lot on mashups. Because if you have these in your collection and you want to integrate them together, let's do it. Let's do it together. Just added a little bit of splatter. This sometimes could go very badly, very quick, but looking pretty good. Just a little bit of green splatter. Then I'm going to take my show up and shine. I'm going to nest her right between this piece of eucalyptus and that piece of leafery. And I think that's going to give me... Put a little glue on the back. Did that right here off camera. It's going to give me a little more comfort. It's going to make me feel a little more comfortable about that intensity of that brown that I've got going there. So I'm going to take somewhere around the S, I think. No, I want this to kind of come up underneath here. So my hands are in the way a little bit, because I'm nesting the very tip of that sentiment right underneath that leafery, and then just kind of popping that down. Give that a little poop, boop, boop, little boopy, digging that, and it kind of comes off the edge. I love this sentiment, show up and shine. I've got a little bit of Nuvo drops in copper here. I'm going to add a few little droplets. I love this sentiment, show up and shine. I think it's very inspiring. No matter what you're doing in your paper crafting, in your job, in your life, show up and shine, friends. Show up every day and shine. Show the world what you've got and own it. Be it. Enjoy. So that's what I take from that show up. I'm being very random in my droplets here, but I am going to focus a little bit of like a cascading droplet happening around this sentiment, and then just kind of off the page a little bit. I'm not even counting or doing any weird things like that. Okay, I got one more little thing I want to do with this stamp, with this project. Catherine just shared, I think the brown is lovely for that big space. I know. Well, you know what? I wasn't so sure about that intensity, but once you start putting your elements on, it gets a little less intense. In the Free to Flourish stamp set, and in a lot of my stamp sets, I add little bits and bobs, like little hearts. This is a little heart. This is kind of like one of my little signature things I like to do. Let's put that on there. I'm going to pick this up with a little bit of medium spruce. And I'm just going to stamp that on. It just adds, I'm going to pop it right here. That little tiny heart in between that leafery. It's sort of just like a little I love you. But just nested right in there. The person you give the card to might not even see it. But you know what? It's a little something that you know you've done and you've added to the project. Oh, I'm digging this card. Let's bring in the original, or my original idea that was a little less brown. But I'm loving this because look at that texture. Because this would be like a wood frame. Wood frame. And it's got a lot of brown in it. I want to share what Robbie just shared, because this is something I talk about. She said, I'm not going to lie. Before I watched your lives, I was very intimidated by your sets. I had a few, but now learning how to do all these wonderful cards, I've been stocking up on all the sets. Thank you for sharing that with me, Robbie, because I don't want anyone to feel intimidated, but I can totally understand how coming to a stamp set like this, how you would be like, oh my gosh, there's all these bits and bobs and different pieces, and what do I do? How do I start? So that's why these lives are really important to me. That's why the card idea sheets that I share with every stamp set release is hugely important to me, so that you get a lot of different card ideas using the stamp set. So Robbie, if you haven't picked up those card idea sheets, you can pick them up at my website, indigojadeart.com. And then just go there and click on freebies. All of them are there. And even the ones that are retired, my stamp sets that have retired, they'll be there too. I'm not taking them down because the stamp sets are out there and you might have them and you might need the ideas. So, okay. Loving the way this looks. I'm loving the way this looks. Okay, I'm going to come back to the front camera. I might need my glasses. I might not. Let's put them on. Cheryl just said, Lisa, what is the large dark stamp on the right from Free to Flourish? Here we go. Let me pop that. It's a big honkin' floral. I love this flower. It's like a cabbage flower. Look at that flower. But you can tell mine's extremely well loved. There's so much black on it. Oh, love the versatility of your stamps. Very cool. Okay, heading back to the front camera. Okay. Love the way this mashup turned out today. Just love it. Now, I want to share. So that was a super fun card. Super fun color palette too. A little bit way different than what I'm generally using. I'm usually super, super bright. I want to share the retiring stamp sets again with you if you missed it and you didn't catch it at the beginning. But these are the stamp sets in my Gina K Designs collection that are retiring. You can find them now while supplies last at ginakdesigns.com in the clearance section. There are lots of things in the clearance section, so give it a peek. There might be some things in there. Now, every single one of these stamp sets that I've got on this graphic here that you can see, they're all linked down below in the description, and I have video tutorials for these stamp sets, so I'm not leaving you in the lurch. Lots of video tutorials, lots of mashups. I've done a lot of recent mashups with these stamp sets. And this one, the New Beginning stamp set with the Luna Moth, I'm going to miss her, but that's okay. She's still going to be around. I'm going to miss her quite a bit. You know, many of you know I've got her right on tattooed. Me and my daughter have this tattoo. Love that stamp set. But super, super grateful that we had time together. We went a little bit over today because I had to dive in just a little deeper on hot press paper and some watercolor and helping you get better results with it. So I think I've answered everybody's questions along the way. I did. Oh, Cheryl just said your sets will not be retired from my inventory. Thank you, Gloria, for telling everybody about the thumbs up. Yeah, apparently like the subscribe and the thumbs up and all those things are kind of important for YouTube. So if you're interested, I'll be back next week with another new mashup. And actually, next Thursday, I almost forgot, brand new stamp set release with Gina K Designs. I'm excited about this one. I know I always say it that it might be my favorite, but I'm really excited about this one. So next, that's happening on Thursday. So I'll have a video that's coming out as part of that release with a whole new line of inspiration and a new stamp set sheet for that new stamp set that's coming out on Thursday. There's a lot coming out on Thursday and a new kit with Gina. And then Friday, I'll be popping in here for our Craft Your Joy Live, and I'll be using that stamp set, the new one, and I'll mash it up with something else. Not sure what we're going to do yet. So super grateful that you're here with me today. Thanks so much for taking the time to join the Craft Your Joy live show. And if you're interested in finding out when all of these things are happening, please consider getting on my email list. The link is down below in the description. And I also have a free community in my Craft Your Joy classroom. And that information is down below in the description as well. I'm never really 100% sure if people see my posts in social media. So I'm utilizing my classroom and my community to share information there and share lots of freebies and different things. So Sue just asked me, did you ever collaborate to make a kit with Gina K? No, because I have my own collection with Gina K. I have releases that come out every month. Gina designs all of the kits and all the beautiful pieces that are a part of those kits. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so don't forget, Gina K Designs is released next week, and it's happening at a different time next Thursday at 1 p.m. Central during Gina's regular live show. And I'm just so grateful you could join me today. I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy with a little bit of inspiration and this brand new stamp set mashup today with some retiring Gina K sets. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye now.